Many people think their dog had a horrible past when they are scared of something, and sometimes that's true, but not always. So, today we're talking about the difference between a traumatized dog versus one with no experience, because both will very likely show fear and it can look pretty similar to us. So, I'm gonna introduce two dogs to you. One traumatized and one's not. Both show exactly the same behavior, or maybe not exactly, but we might get confused. So, dog number one is Pepper. Pepper is a 1-year-old golden Aussie mix, fear aggressive towards people. So she's lunging, barking, growling, trying to nip people. She's never been successful yet, not for the lack of trying, but her human is really, really good at keeping her from being successful with that. But she's unable to have guests over with Peppa in the house. She's unable to go for regular walks because Peppa lives in the city and she's just going insane whenever she sees a person. Now, dog number two is Julie. Julie is a 1-year-old shepherd mix. She is fear aggressive towards people. She is living in the city, on the outskirts of the city. She is having big trouble with having guests over, especially when the guests move, especially when the guests enter the house, and sometimes on walks. Both dogs are friendly with the immediate family. Both dogs are relaxed at home. One is traumatized, one is not. So if you saw just the behavior, just the lunging, barking, growling, trying to bite people, you would not see a difference between them. They both show signs of fear, so they are both not 100% just forward. They both have still little tendencies backward, not much because they have a history of lunging, barking, growling, so they know that the strategy works. And when dogs know that a strategy works, they get very confident with the strategy. That doesn't mean that the fear isn't the cause of the whole thing. It just means that they are confident in the strategy they are displaying, right? So we might not see the fear, but we do see the confidence in the strategy. Now, how do we know which one is traumatized? Well, let's go a little bit more into detail. Peppa shows more general skepticism of people. She is careful around people in general. It doesn't matter what kind of people. So she doesn't make a difference between men and women. She doesn't make a difference between old people, children. It's a little bit worse when they smell funny, so drunk people. It's a little bit worse when they are loud, so groups of teenagers are especially challenging, but it's not that distinct, right? She has to watch people before deciding if she can trust anybody, and she can build trust to certain people. She learns a strategy very quickly and is open to learning, and she has very few setbacks in learning. Now, watching people can be a personality thing. So this doesn't mean trauma or no trauma, it just means this is her, right? The other things can give us a hint, right? Julie has more trust in people in general. She can read people better, is very empathetic to people's emotions. She reacts more extreme in specific situations rather than the distance. So, for example, if someone does a sudden hand movement, she reacts instead of just reacting when somebody comes close to her. She learns a strategy quickly as well, but not as strongly, and she has more severe setbacks. Now, by now, And tell me in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, would you have guessed which one is traumatized? I can tell you that Peppa has no experience with people. She has a severe lack of socialization. She has grown up in a barn, so she has met her mom, her siblings, 2 people, and that's about it. Then she was adopted at 8 weeks of age into the city, and then she was confronted with all these people suddenly. And that was a cultural shock, let's call it that. Julie was adopted at about 8 months of age. She has been living with a person who caused her trauma. Now, I'm telling you what happened because for me, imagining things that could have happened are worse. But if you don't want to know, you can skip this. I'm not going into detail because I think that's not necessary. She experienced intimidation. So the person cornered her, yelled at her, things like that. Just scared her with the physical appearance and with the body language. And he also hit her. So I'm not telling you the most horrific thing, but of course this is bad enough, right? And for her to be very empathetic and very sensitive to people's emotions and body language is a survival skill. Or at least that's what we have lately found out in humans. And why shouldn't it be the same thing for dogs, right? So what we can see with her having experienced socialization in her first weeks and being trusting in general, but reacting aggressively in the specific situations can point us to the trauma. Now, the risk is the same, right? So it's not like one dog's more dangerous than the other. Both dogs could be a bite risk. Both dogs need to be treated respectfully. Both dogs need to learn a strategy. Julie will need a little bit longer for that strategy to really learn that she can trust the strategy, that she can trust her people to watch out for her. They're both young, so that's our advantage, right? Now, if we have a combo of both, and that's possible too, and that's something that we see fairly commonly in my country, and I'm sure it's the same thing for dogs that come from puppy mills, where they have a lack of socialization and trauma. And that's when things get really tricky, because we cannot rely on the dogs being able to read people, and they're expecting bad things from them. So that's really hard, right? So getting them to trust into us as trainers, getting them to trust into the new guardians, getting them to trust into a strategy, getting them to trust into a learning process, all these things are way more tricky if those two things are combined, right? So if you know your dog has no experience and trauma, be sure that this can take longer. And I would get as much help as I can, right? Because the longer it takes, the more difficult it gets, and the longer our dogs stay in this fear state, and that's not comfortable, right? So whenever our dogs are fearful of something and they're constantly confronted with that, and I mean, we are living in the human world, so if you're not completely remote somewhere, you're meeting people and your dog's meeting people, and that's something that shouldn't be scary all the time, right? So yes, we need to help them, but what I think we can learn from this is that if we don't know if it's a trauma or not, we shouldn't always expect the worst. We shouldn't always imagine the most horrific things our dogs might have experienced, right? Because that could compromise our ability to help them. Instead, what I have found very, very helpful is to just go with the flow. Just listen to the dogs and listen to what they're showing us in this moment and trying to take what they give us, put it into a strategy, and do the best we can. Also, expect setbacks. Setbacks are just part of learning. It's normal and it's part of the process. It shouldn't be more setbacks than going forward, right? So always document the process, because sometimes it can feel like we have only setbacks. But if we look at the documentation, we see that we actually had successes along the way and fairly recently. So we can celebrate those and just accept the setbacks as they are. Move forward and again, go with the flow. Now, if we don't see success, or if the process is just slow, or if we feel like the dog's suffering, or in any case, when we either need to move faster, or, to be honest, by now, I just like to do this with few cases anyway, I like to include vet behaviorists. Because I think nobody should be stuck in fear if it's not necessary, or for longer than necessary, because it's a really, really uncomfortable state, and vet behaviorists can go at it from a different angle as well. So if we work together, we can help even better. So don't be shy. If it's possible, include a vet behaviorist as well. And of course, if you need help with any of the strategies, go to the description, book a free call where you see what I can do, right? Now, the best way I have found training to work is if we keep it light and if we keep it fun. So if fear is involved and we construct like this really, really difficult thing, it becomes really tricky and frustrating for us, and we get stuck. If we keep it light and we make the exercises and the strategies as easy as possible, we can celebrate success much quicker and get our dogs out of that state as fast as possible. With that said, have fun training, and we'll see each other next time. Bye!